"You need a family by Friday," the lawyer said. Then he looked at the woman who hated him. Evan Caldwell had survived a $2 billion merger that made 3 senators sweat, weathered back-to-back class-action lawsuits without losing a single night of sleep, and once stood perfectly still while a journalist threw a hot latte at his face during a press conference and said, calmly, "You missed my tie." He was not a man who flinched. He was, however, a man currently staring at his lawyer like Harold Fitch had just told him the building was on fire and also, by the way, it was his fault. "Say that again," Evan said. Harold didn't blink. Harold never blinked. It was one of his more unsettling qualities. You need to demonstrate a stable family environment before Friday. He set the manila folder on the desk between them, with the quiet finality of a man who had long ago made peace with delivering terrible news before 9 a.m. Preferably one that existed before this week. The 42nd floor of Caldwell Group's downtown tower was, on most mornings, Evan's favorite place on earth. Floor-to-ceiling glass. The city spread below like something he'd built himself. Clean lines, clean air, absolute silence, except for what he chose to let in. This morning, the silence felt like a verdict. 3 weeks ago, his sister Sophie had been driving home from a late shift when a driver ran a red light on Mercer Street. She was 31 years old. She had laugh lines already forming at the corners of her eyes, an opinion about every movie ever made, and a 7-year-old daughter named Lily who currently occupied Evan's $12,000 Italian leather sofa and had spent the better part of yesterday asking why there were no stuffed animals anywhere in the Point. Apartment. "It's a design choice," Evan had said. Lily had considered this for a long moment, then said, "That's sad, Uncle Evan." He answered to it now. "Donna filed Tuesday," Harold continued, turning pages in the folder with the measured pace of a man who billed by the hour and felt no particular urgency. "Donna and her husband, Mark. They have a 4-bedroom house in Pasadena, 2 golden retrievers, and a yard with an actual swing set." He paused. "The court tends to find swing sets compelling. I can buy a swing set. You live in a penthouse, Evan. I can buy a building with a yard." Harold looked at him over his reading glasses with the expression of a man who had known Evan since he was 26 and had watched him try to solve every human problem like it was a Q3 earnings miss. "The court does not want you to acquire real estate to prove you're a nurturing guardian. They want to see evidence of community connection, emotional stability, and ideally," he paused here, just long enough to be theatrical about it, "a committed partner. Someone who demonstrates that Lily would be entering a family unit, not a very expensive bachelor situation." Evan stared at him. "You're telling me," he said slowly, "that I need a girlfriend. I'm telling you that a demonstrated, meaningful relationship with a stable individual would significantly strengthen your case." Harold removed his glasses and set them on the folder. "The welfare investigator meets with Lily at her school this Friday. That gives you 4 days. 4 days. Evan had restructured a Fortune 500 company in 72 hours once. He'd turned around a PR disaster involving a leaked internal memo and a congressman in under 48. 4 days was, theoretically, enough time for anything. He pulled out his phone, opened Google, typed, and he would never admit this to another living soul, how to get a girlfriend fast. The first result was a Medium article titled, "Top 10 Red Flags, You're a Workaholic, and Why You'll Die Alone." The thumbnail image was a stock photo of a man in a very nice suit eating lunch alone at his desk. Evan owned that suit. "That's you," said a small voice behind him. He turned. Lily was standing in the doorway of the conference room in her pajamas, the ones with the cartoon sloths holding a juice box and staring at his phone screen with the unsentimental clarity that 7-year-olds applied to all situations equally. "You're supposed to be at Mrs. Patterson's," Evan said. She had a phone call. Lily pointed at the article. "Uncle Evan, number 4 says you never talk about feelings. You never talk about feelings." I talk about feelings. Name one feeling. Harold made a sound that was almost certainly a laugh, converted at the last second into a cough. We're done here, Evan said. Harold closed the folder and stood, already reaching for his coat. One more thing. Lily's school, Eastside Elementary, the investigator will observe her there Friday afternoon. I'd strongly suggest you pick her up in person this week. Be present, be visible. He buttoned his coat with the composure of a man about to walk out of a problem that was entirely someone else's, and perhaps look into the question of a companion, sincerely this time, not via Google. He left. Lily finished her juice box. Evan sat for a moment in the kind of silence that had nothing peaceful in it, then picked up his car keys. He had never picked Lily up from school before. He hadn't known, until he was standing outside Eastside Elementary at 3:15 on a Tuesday afternoon, that the pickup line had a system, a specific, apparently sacred sequence of rules involving painted curb zones and a laminated number card he didn't have, and that violating this system would cause a woman in a yellow vest to look at him the way air traffic controllers looked at pilots who asked to land on a taxiway. He was still recovering from that when he walked through the main entrance and followed the hand-lettered signs down a hallway loud with the particular chaos of a school day ending and pushed open the door marked Room 7, Grade 2. The classroom was everything his office was not. Crayon drawings covered every wall, painted paper planets hung from the ceiling on fishing line. The reading corner had a rug shaped like a giant open book. It smelled like tempera paint and graham crackers, and every surface had something on it, a half-finished art project, a stack of readers, a jar of colored pencils with a small hand-drawn label that said, "Please put me back the right way." Lily was sitting cross-legged in the reading corner with two other kids, deeply absorbed in something that seemed to involve a lot of pointing. And at the front of the room, erasing the whiteboard with the particular efficiency of someone who had done this exact thing approximately 10,000 times, was a woman who turned when she heard the door. She was maybe 5 to 4, dark hair pulled back in a way that had probably started the morning neat and had since accumulated one escaped curl near her left ear. She had chalk on her sleeve, a lanyard with approximately 15 things clipped to it, and the expression of someone who was professionally warm to everyone who walked through that door until she wasn't. Her eyes found his face. Something shifted. "Can I help you?" she asked. Her voice was pleasant. Perfectly, carefully pleasant, the way you might speak to someone standing on your doorstep whom you hadn't decided about yet. "I'm here for Lily. Lily Caldwell." He extended his hand on instinct, boardroom instinct. "Evan Caldwell." She looked at his hand. Then she looked at his face. She shook his hand with a firm, brief grip, and she smiled a composed, precise smile that reached her mouth with impressive accuracy and stopped there completely. "Oh," she said. The single syllable carried a weight he couldn't immediately identify. Evan Caldwell. Not a question, not a greeting. A recognition, the kind that preceded something. "I know who you are." Her eyes were calm. Her voice was warm. And somewhere in the space between those two things was something that, in a boardroom, he would have immediately recognized as, "This negotiation is not going the way you think." He had no idea what he'd walked into. But the smile on Maya Reyes's face told him, very clearly, that she did. "There are people you dislike for vague, half-formed reasons, the way they chew, the way they say, actually, the particular frequency of their laugh. It's petty, and you know it's petty, and you mostly let it go. And then there are people you dislike because, 18 months ago, they signed a piece of paper that demolished the only place in a 3-mile radius where kids who couldn't afford after-school programs could come on Wednesday afternoons and learn that the color green could mean something besides a traffic light. Maya Reyes was very clear on which category Evan Caldwell fell into. She had found out about the sale the way most people found out about things that were being done to their neighborhood rather than for it. After the fact, from a flyer stapled to a telephone pole. Caldwell Group acquires Eastside Community Center site. Development to begin Q1. The flyer had been there long enough to get rained on. The decision, apparently, had not. The Eastside Community Center had been many things to many people. But to Maya it had been, for 4 years, a Wednesday. Every Wednesday from 4 to 6, she set up folding tables in the main room, taped paper to the surfaces so the paint didn't bleed through, and taught 14 kids between the ages of 6 and 11 how to hold a brush like they meant it. Most of them came from the apartment blocks on the east side of the neighborhood, the ones that hadn't been renovated yet, the ones where the hallways still smelled like other people's dinners and the windows didn't quite seal against the wind in January. None of them paid for the classes. That had always been the point. She had stood outside the building on the last Wednesday before demolition began, with 9 other people and a handmade sign, in the light rain, for 2 hours. Someone from Caldwell Group's PR department sent an email the following morning. It used the phrase community impact considerations 4 times and the word unfortunately twice and said absolutely nothing. She had kept that email, not out of sentimentality, just so she'd never accidentally soften the memory. So when Evan Caldwell walked through the door of room 7 at 3:15 on a Tuesday in his $3,000 suit, she recognized him, the way you recognized a headline that had made you put the paper down. He looked exactly like his press photos, which was, somehow, the most irritating thing about him. He was tall in a way that made her classroom feel smaller, and he moved through it with the carefully managed discomfort of a man whose environments were usually more angular and considerably quieter. His eyes tracked the room in the systematic way of someone who assessed things before committing to them. She watched him clock the planetary mobile, the reading rug, the jar of pencils. She watched his expression do the thing that people's expressions did when they walked in here expecting chaos, and found instead that everything had a place and a purpose, and someone had thought very hard about where the light fell. She gave him nothing. Professionally pleasant, perfectly contained. Then Lily looked up from the reading corner and said, "Uncle Evan," and launched herself across the room with the full-body commitment that 7-year-olds brought to reunions of any duration, even if the duration was 6 hours, and Maya felt the familiar, involuntary unwinding that happened every single time one of her kids ran to someone who loved them. She had no control over it. It was a design flaw she'd long since stopped trying to fix. She smiled, and this time it reached her eyes, and she was aware without looking that Evan Caldwell noticed the difference. He crouched to catch Lily, which surprised her. Not the careful executive crouch of a man worried about his trousers, a real one. Like someone who had been practicing. Don't read into it, she told herself. The bar is on the floor. He stayed after the other parents had collected their children. She'd known he would. He had the posture of someone who had more to say, and the confidence of someone who assumed he'd be allowed to say it. She was stacking reading journals when he spoke. "Miss Reyes." He had the voice of someone accustomed to rooms listening when he talked. "I'll be direct. I need your help, and I'm prepared to." "Stop right there." He stopped. The silence was brief but genuine. She got the impression that people did not often interrupt Evan Caldwell, and that when they did, he required a moment to recalibrate. She set down the stack of journals and turned to face him. She kept her voice even, because the evenness was important, not for his sake, but because she'd learned a long time ago that anger without control just gave people like him something to dismiss. 18 months ago, she said, your company purchased the Eastside Community Center. You had the building demolished to break ground on a commercial development. She watched his expression. I ran a free arts program out of that building for 4 years. 23 kids. Not one of them was consulted. Not one person from Caldwell Group came to the community meeting. We got an email. Evan held her gaze. He didn't look away, which she gave him fractional reluctant credit for. I'm aware, he started. I'm not finished. She wasn't. You want me to help you look like someone worth trusting with a child. And you've opened that request with, I'm prepared to pay you. So I need you to understand that you have, in the span of about 45 seconds, reminded me of every reason I have to say no, and then given me an additional one. She picked up her stack of journals again. You can't buy my credibility, Mr. Caldwell, and I will not pretend, in front of Lily, to be something I'm not. The room was very quiet. Evan opened his mouth, then closed it. It might have been the most human thing she'd seen him do. From the hallway, through the door that neither of them had thought to close, came a small, clear voice. "Miss Reyes?" Lily was standing in the doorway in her backpack, juice box in hand, with the expression of someone who had absorbed approximately 80% of the preceding conversation and made her own assessment. "Just so you know, Uncle Evan doesn't know how to cook anything except boiled eggs and anxiety." Maya looked at Evan. Evan looked at Lily. Lily looked at both of them with the uncomplicated directness of a person who had not yet learned that truth required timing. "I'm just saying what's true," she added helpfully. The silence stretched another beat. And then Maya couldn't entirely stop it. The corner of her mouth moved. She pressed her lips together and looked at the floor. "Go wait by the front office, babe," she said to Lily. 2 minutes. Lily assessed the situation, apparently concluded she had contributed what was needed, and left with the quiet confidence of someone whose work here was done. When Maya looked back at Evan, something in his expression had shifted. Not softened, exactly, recalibrated. "Let me ask you something," she said. "And I need an honest answer, not a prepared one." He waited. "Do you actually want to raise her?" She kept her voice neutral, genuinely asking. Not because of the court, not because it's the right optics. "Do you want Lily?" The pause that followed was too long for a man who had answers ready for everything. She watched something move across his face, not a performance, just a person standing on uncertain ground and knowing it. "I don't know how," he said finally. The words came out quieter than anything else he'd said. "I don't know how to do any of this, but she doesn't have anyone else." It was not a declaration. It was not a speech. It was just a man in an expensive suit in a crayon-colored classroom, admitting, without embellishment, the one true thing he had. Maya looked at him for a moment longer than she meant to. Then she looked away. She picked up her bag. "I'll think about it," she said, and she said it to the window. Not to him, because she didn't want him to see that the answer had already moved, just slightly, in a direction she hadn't planned for. The plan was simple. Maya would play the role of close family friend, nothing more, nothing less. Evan would play the role of man actively learning to be a human being. Lily would play herself, which was, frankly, the strongest performance any of them had to offer. Everything would remain controlled, contained, and clearly defined. Obviously, completely under control. She had called him back the next morning, Wednesday, at 7:15, while she was still in the parking lot of the school eating a granola bar and reconsidering every decision she'd ever made. "I have conditions," she said, without preamble. "I'm listening." His voice was already alert. She got the impression he didn't have a slow start setting. "I'll be present for any welfare check or official observation. I won't lie to the investigator. If she asks me direct questions, I give her direct answers. That means you actually have to be what we're presenting. No shortcuts, no hired nannies doing the work while you look good for the camera. Understood?" "And you learn," she said. "For real. Lily's routine, her preferences, her sensitivities. You don't outsource that. Also understood." She paused. There was one more thing, and she wasn't sure she had the standing to ask it. She'd turned it over all night, which was the reason she'd been awake at 7:15 in a parking lot. "There's one other thing," she said, and she heard her own voice go quieter in a way she hadn't planned. "I want you to look into rebuilding a community space in Eastside. Not for PR, just look into it. Seriously." Silence on the line. Then, "Okay, that's it? Just okay? You said look into it. I'll look into it." She hadn't expected that. She'd expected negotiation, or deflection, or a very smooth pivot. She sat with the okay for a moment, not entirely sure what to do with it. "Then we have an arrangement," she said. "Can I ask what changed your mind?" She watched a crow land on the hood of the car in front of hers and immediately begin judging her. Lily said, "You sit next to her bed until she falls asleep." A beat. "She told you that?" "No. I overheard her tell another kid in class." She opened her car door. "Don't read too much into this, Mr. Caldwell. I'm doing it for her." "I know," he said. He said it like he meant it. which was inconveniently more disarming than if he'd argued. The grocery store was Wednesday evening. Evan called from the cereal aisle at 6:47, which Maya knew because she was in the middle of grading a set of math worksheets, and her phone screen said E. Caldwell, with the small, exhausted energy of something that had been happening all week. She drew pictures on the list. He said, "There's a drawing next to string cheese that I think is supposed to be the cheese, but it could also be a ghost. Is it ghost-shaped cheese? Is that a product?" "Hez, it's just regular string cheese, Evan. There are 6 varieties here. Pick the one with the cow on it. 2 of them have cows. Then pick the one that looks most like a cheese." A pause. She wrote cereal, the good kind, and underlined it twice. "Which one is the good kind?" "Fruity O's, the pink box. That is not nutritionally. It's a Wednesday night. Buy the pink box." A longer pause. "She also needs, and I'm reading directly, unicorn kind or princess kind. I'm looking at 2 separate boxes and I genuinely cannot determine which takes priority." Maya set down her red pen. "Which one is she more this week? I have no idea how to answer that." "Then, buy both. That is not an optimal." "Evan." She said his name with the particular patience she reserved for students who were very smart and also very wrong. "Buy both boxes." She heard him put both boxes in the cart. She could tell by the sound, and something about the compliance, the complete absence of further argument, made her press her lips together against a smile she had absolutely not budgeted for. "Anything else on the list?" she asked. "There's a drawing at the bottom that I think is either a dog or a request for a dog." "It's a dog. Do not get the dog." "I wasn't going to get the dog." You hesitated. "I was reading the list." "Evan, I didn't get the dog," he said. Thursday evening, Lily sat at the kitchen island with a large piece of white paper and the specific focus of someone engaged in official business. "It's for school," she explained, without looking up. "My family tree." Evan stood on the other side of the counter. He looked at the paper the way Maya imagined he looked at financial projections that contained a number he hadn't been expecting, carefully, without reaction, processing something privately. The tree was drawn in green crayon. Good, solid branches. Some of the limbs already had names on oval shapes. Mommy, Grandma Reyes, Grandpa Caldwell. The ovals for Sophie had a small star drawn next to it, which Lily had done without comment, and which Evan had looked at for a long moment before looking away. Several branches were still empty. Lily chewed on the end of her crayon in a way that would have given Maya a professional eye twitch. Then looked up with the expression of someone about to ask something that mattered. "Uncle," she said, "can I put people on here even if they're not family yet? Like, if I want them to be?" Evan was quiet for what felt like a long time. Maya wasn't there. This was a story he told her later, and she knew he was telling it accurately because his voice had gone very neutral in the particular way. It went neutral when something had actually reached him. "Yeah," he said finally. "You can put whoever you want." Lily nodded, satisfied, and bent back over the paper. She drew a new oval carefully, with real attention, on a branch she'd left empty on the right side of the tree. She wrote inside it in her best handwriting, the kind she used for important things, "Miss Reyes." Evan watched her write it. He didn't say anything. He walked to the refrigerator, opened it, and stood there looking at its contents for slightly longer than the task required. Friday afternoon, the park 3 blocks from the school. The plan, as Evan had outlined it to Maya in a text that read with the precision of a project brief, was natural, relaxed, normal afternoon outing, low-key, conversational. No overperformance. The reality was that Evan did not know the rules of tag, not the actual rules, which turned out to be more negotiated than Maya had realized, governed by a complex Lily-specific code that included safe zones, a counting system, and at least one clause about disputes that she called the Lily Amendment, and that Maya, rounding a park bench at moderate speed, caught her shoe on the leg of it, and executed what could generously be called a recovery, and less generously called a full stumble, in front of a 7-year-old and a welfare investigator. "I saw that," Lily announced. "I'm fine," Maya said, with dignity. "You made a noise. An involuntary one. Lily considered this, then tagged Maya on the shoulder and sprinted away screaming "World Champion," which settled the matter. Mrs. Susan sat on a bench 15 feet away with a clipboard and the expression of a woman who had seen many things and would continue to see many things without revealing what she thought of any of them. She wrote something down. Maya could not tell what. She had been writing things down with maddening consistency all afternoon. Evan, for his part, was trying. Maya could see it. The effort was visible, in the slight stiffness of someone performing naturalness rather than inhabiting it. But underneath that, something that wasn't performance at all. He pushed Lily on the swings at exactly the height she asked for, and not an inch higher. When she fell off the climbing structure, a low one, no danger, more drama than injury, he was there before Maya was, checking her palms, making the right sounds. He was learning in real time, right in front of everyone, and he hadn't stopped trying once. Mrs. Susan spoke to Lily privately on the bench near the fountain, while Evan went to get water from the car, and Maya stood a careful distance away, watching the pigeons ignore a pretzel someone had dropped. She wasn't trying to overhear, she just didn't move away in time. "Do you like living with your uncle?" Mrs. Susan asked. Her voice was gentle, unhurried, the practiced warmth of someone who asked hard questions softly. Lily thought about this. Not a child's quick answer, but a real deliberation, the kind that meant she understood the question was important. "He doesn't know how to do a lot of things," Lily said finally. "Like he didn't know how to pack lunch right for the first 4 days. He kept forgetting the water." She paused. "But he's learning. He looks stuff up." Another pause, and then, quieter. "And every night he sits on the floor next to my bed until I fall asleep. He thinks I don't know because I keep my eyes closed." She looked at her shoes. "But I know, and I sleep better because of it." Maya stood very still. She wasn't supposed to have heard that. Evan didn't know she was close enough to hear it. Lily hadn't said it for her. It was just a small true thing a child was offering into a safe space, because she was 7 years old, and she missed her mother, and she was telling the truth about what she had instead. Maya looked across the park at Evan, who was walking back with 3 water bottles held awkwardly in one arm because he'd grabbed one for each of them without being asked. For the first time since Tuesday afternoon, she looked at him and didn't see the headline. She wasn't sure what she saw instead. She just knew it was different. On the drive home, Lily fell asleep between one sentence and the next, her head tipped sideways against the window in the way children slept completely, without negotiation. The car was quiet. City lights slid past in long amber streaks. Maya looked at the window. Not at him. "She was right about you," she said. "The learning part." She felt rather than saw him turn to look at her. She kept her eyes forward, watching the lights. She had meant to leave it there. Clean, small, contained. But he didn't fill the silence with anything, and the absence of it sat between them differently than silence usually did. Not empty, not awkward, just present, like something that had been given room to breathe for the first time. She didn't say anything else. Neither did he. And somehow, for reasons she was not yet prepared to examine, that was the moment the line between what was real and what was arranged became, just slightly, harder to find. The problem with building something beautiful on a foundation of arrangement, even a well-intentioned one, even one that had quietly become something else without anyone formally announcing it, is that you never know when it breaks. You only know that it will. And it will choose the worst possible moment, because that is what true things do when they've been waiting too long to surface. The week before the hearing had a rhythm to it that none of them had planned. Maya came by on Tuesday and Thursday evenings, officially to help Lily with homework, unofficially because the arrangement had blurred somewhere around day 5 into something that no longer required a stated reason. Lily's backpack got unpacked at the kitchen island. Spelling words got practiced over what Evan was learning to call dinner and what Lily called the experiment, because his relationship with a stovetop remained optimistic at best. "That's too much salt," Lily said on Tuesday, watching him stir something that had started as pasta and was negotiating its identity. "It's seasoned. Uncle, it's white." Maya, sitting on the counter eating an apple because she had arrived 40 minutes ago and somehow not left, said nothing. She was watching him with an expression he had started to recognize, the one that was almost amusement, but held something quieter behind it. Something she hadn't named and he hadn't asked about, because asking would require acknowledging it existed. The recipe said a pinch, he said. A pinch, Lily said, not a fistful. Those are subjective units. Heaven, Maya said. I know, he said. He started over. Maya ate her apple. Lily provided commentary throughout. These were, Evan understood later, the evenings he would remember most precisely, not the ones where anything significant happened. Just the ordinary accumulation of a small life finding its shape around his, and the particular quality of a kitchen at 7:30 p.m. When the overhead light was too bright, and someone small was sitting on the counter humming to herself, and everything was just slightly too loud and too present, and nothing like what he'd built his life around. He didn't find it uncomfortable anymore. That was the thing he hadn't prepared for. On Thursday, after Lily was asleep, Maya had stayed to go over the next day's schedule for the observation. He'd been reading when she walked back into the living room a chapter book he'd pulled from Lily's shelf, Charlotte's Web, which he hadn't read since he was 8 and was finding, at 34, significantly more devastating than he remembered. Maya had stopped in the doorway. What? He said. Nothing, she said. But she'd looked at the book, and then at him, and then she'd sat down on the other end of the couch and pulled out her own papers, and they'd sat in the same room doing separate things for 40 minutes, and when she left, she'd said goodnight like it was the most natural thing in the world. He'd stood at the closed door for a moment after. He wasn't thinking about the hearing. The message came to Maya at 11:47 on Wednesday morning, during her lunch break. It was from her colleague Priya, who had good intentions and a habit of forwarding things without reading the room, and it contained a link to an 18-month-old article from a local business publication with the subject line, "Is this the guy you're helping?" The article had a photograph. Evan at a press event, a week after the acquisition, was announced, composed, confident, the measured expression of a man who had already moved on to the next line item. The quote attributed to Caldwell Group's PR spokesperson used the phrase, economically underutilized space, to describe the community center, and long-term neighborhood investment to describe the office development that replaced it. Maya had read this article before. She had read it the week it was published, standing in her kitchen with her coffee getting cold, and she had felt the particular kind of anger that came from watching something you loved be reduced to a line in someone else's growth strategy. She read it again now. Same words, same photograph, same quote, different feeling. Before, it had been clean, a clear wrong, done by a clear stranger. Now it sat in her chest with an edge it hadn't had before, because now she knew the way he stood in a grocery store aisle genuinely puzzled by the cereal options, and the way his voice went careful when Lily mentioned Sophie, and the fact that he had read a children's book alone on a Thursday night to understand a 7-year-old better. That made it worse. It was supposed to make it better, and instead it made it worse. She put her phone down, picked it up, put it down again. She went back to her classroom and taught the afternoon the way she always did, completely, and her full attention on the 22 kids who needed it, and she didn't let herself think about it until she was in her car at 4 o'clock, and then she sat there for a long time before she started the engine. She texted him, "I need to talk to you tonight. In person." He replied in under a minute, "I'll be here." Lily was in bed. The apartment was quiet in the way expensive apartments were quiet, not silence, exactly, but an absence of the city, the world held at a deliberate remove. Evan was at the kitchen island when she arrived. He looked at her face when she walked in, and something in his expression changed, not defensively, just preparatory, the look of a man who recognized an oncoming conversation and intended to stay in his seat for it. She didn't sit down. "I need to ask you something directly," she said. "Did you read the community feedback before you approved the demolition order for East Side?" 1 second of silence. It was 1 second too long. "Yes," he said. He didn't reach for anything else. "Didn't qualify it. And you signed it anyway?" "Yes." She looked at him steadily, keeping her voice even because the evenness was the only thing she trusted right now. "Why?" He told her. He told her the whole of it, the acquisition timeline, the zoning approvals, the shareholder commitments, the window for breaking ground, that could not be moved without triggering a clause, that would have cost the company $40 million. He laid it out with the clarity of someone who had thought through it thoroughly and concluded, correctly within its own logic, that the decision was sound. Every word of it was accurate. Every word of it was exactly the problem. "So you read 23 letters from families in that neighborhood," she said, when he finished. "And you signed it anyway because the math worked out. It's more complicated than—" "I know it's more complicated." Her voice stayed flat. She would not let it do anything else. "That's not what I'm asking." She looked at him. "I'm asking whether it was wrong." The pause lasted long enough that she had her answer before he spoke. "The decision was defensible. That's not the same thing." He stopped. "Do you know what the worst part is?" She said it quietly, not as an attack but as the plain truth she needed him to hear. "It's not that you did it. I knew you did it before any of this started. It's that you're standing here right now, after everything these weeks have been, and you still can't say it was wrong." She felt something close behind her eyes and refused it. "I started to think you were someone else. That's on me, Maya." "Don't." She picked up her bag. "I'll be there Friday. I said I would, and I will, because this is about Lily, but I need you to understand that I'm there for her." She left. He didn't follow. He didn't sleep. Not really. He lay in the dark and looked at the ceiling and did not think about the hearing. In the morning, Lily came to find him at the kitchen island before school. She climbed up on the stool and looked at him with the careful attention of a child who had learned to read adults the way other people read weather. "Did you make Miss Reyes sad?" she asked. Evan looked at his coffee. "Yeah," he said, "I did." Lily absorbed this. "Are you going to fix it?" He didn't know how to explain to a 7-year-old or to himself that the thing he needed to fix had happened before he'd known her, before any of this, and that the version of himself who had signed that paper had not yet sat in a crayon-colored classroom and been told that he was a red flag article with good hair. He didn't know how to explain that some things couldn't be argued or acquired or strategized into resolution. "I'm going to try," he said. Lily looked at him for another moment, then slid off the stool. "You should try fast," she said. "The hearing's Thursday." He found the project file at midnight. It was archived in the shared drive, 18 months buried under newer acquisitions, and he opened it with the systematic intention of someone reviewing a record, because that was the frame he still knew how to use. He read through the approvals, the zoning documents, the financial analysis. Then he found the community correspondence folder. There were 31 letters. He had known, at the time, that they existed. He had not read them, because reading them was not part of the decision matrix. He read them now. Families. A church that used the meeting room on Sundays. A woman who ran an ESL class for new neighbors. An elderly man who wrote one careful paragraph about where he went to be around other people since his wife passed. And near the bottom, a letter on plain paper, signed M. Reyes, grade 2 teacher, Eastside Elementary. 3 paragraphs about a Wednesday afternoon arts program, what it gave kids who had nothing else after school, why the space mattered. Below the signature, in a second column, a list, 23 names. Children's names, first names only, printed in careful block letters the way a teacher printed when she wanted to make sure something was legible. Ages in parentheses. 6 years old, 8, 7, 7, 9, 6. Evan sat with the paper for a long time. He wasn't looking at the names as a record. He was reading them the way you read something that had been waiting for you, that had always been there, that you had simply chosen, once, not to see. He closed the file. He sat in the silence of the apartment, the expensive, carefully constructed silence, and outside the door of Lily's room, the small nightlight she'd asked him to buy, the one shaped like a star, not a moon. She had been specific, made a thin line of yellow light under the door. He looked at it for a long time. Then he opened a new document and started to write. Evan Caldwell had learned, over 14 years of building a company, that an apology in business was a tool. Delivered correctly, it de-escalated, it repositioned, it moved the conversation forward. He had issued them with precision and zero personal cost, and they had worked every time. An apology to someone you loved, someone you hadn't yet allowed yourself to call that, even privately, Even at midnight, with a children's book on your lap, was the one thing he had no playbook for, no framework, no prior model to reference. He was, for the first time in a very long time, working without a net. He made the calls on Wednesday morning. Not from his office, from the kitchen, while Lily was at school, and the apartment held the particular quiet of a space that had learned, recently, to expect to be occupied. The district planning office first, then the East Side Neighborhood Association. Then his own legal team, to draft terms he'd been composing in his head since midnight, on the notes app of his phone, in the dark. The proposal was straightforward. Full funding for a new community space on the East Side site, built to the specifications of the neighborhood it would serve, governed by a community board with no Caldwell Group representation. The building would bear no company name. There would be no press release, no donor wall, no brand visibility of any kind. His communications director called back 20 minutes later. "Are you sure you don't want to announce this before the hearing? The timing would be no announcement," Evan said. "Evan, this is a significant no announcement." He paused. "And take my name off the proposal. List it as an anonymous donor through the foundation." A silence on the line. Then, "Is everything okay?" "I'm working on it," he said, and ended the call. He did not tell Maya. The hearing was Friday. Today was Wednesday. Those facts had nothing to do with each other, and he needed them to have nothing to do with each other, because the only version of this that meant anything was the one where he had done it on a Wednesday night after reading 23 names, 2 days before anyone would ever know. The family court hearing room was smaller than he'd expected. Wood paneling, fluorescent light, the ambient bureaucratic hum of a place where important things happened inside ordinary-looking rooms. Donna and her husband Mark sat at one table with their attorney. Evan sat at the other with Harold, who had arrived with 2 copies of every document and the expression of a man prepared for anything. Maya sat in the gallery with Lily, 1 row behind the bar. Lily was wearing her best dress, the navy one with the white collar that she'd chosen herself, and that Maya had helped her press that morning, a detail Evan had been told by Lily in full and unnecessary procedural detail. Mrs. Susan presented her report. She was precise, measured, and thorough in the way of someone who understood that what she said in this room mattered past its walls. She noted Evan's demonstrable progress. She noted Lily's clear attachment. She noted, in the particular careful language of welfare assessment, the positive presence in the household of a consistent adult figure, with whom Lily has an established and trusting relationship, and she did not name Maya, but every person in the room understood who she meant. Donna's attorney stood. He was the kind of lawyer who prefaced every question with a long look, as if the pause itself were evidence. "Miss Reyes," he said, without turning from the judge, "you've been described in the welfare report as a significant positive presence in the child's life during this period." He paused. "Is that relationship genuine? Or was your involvement arranged specifically to strengthen Mr. Caldwell's custody case?" The room went quiet. Every face turned toward the gallery. Maya sat with her hands folded in her lap, and Evan watched her. And in all the years he had spent reading rooms, reading the exact temperature of a silence before a vote, a verdict, a decision, he had never felt a pause like this one. It was not the silence of something unknown. It was the silence of something true finding the right words. Maya stood. She did it without hesitation, not defiantly, not dramatically. She stood the way she did everything, with the quiet, grounded sureness of someone who had spent years showing up completely for things that mattered. "It was arranged," she said. Her voice was clear and even, carrying without effort. "At the beginning." "Yes." A shift in the room. Harold made a small sound beside him. "But what I witnessed over the past 3 weeks," she paused, and when she continued her voice had changed, lost its courtroom register, and become something else, was a man learning how to love a child more than he loves being in control of things, learning how to sit on a floor in the dark and just be there. That is not something you can stage. She looked across the room, at Evan. "And I will not stand here and testify to something I don't believe. What I believe is that Lily is safe with him. More than safe." Evan looked at her. He had no next move prepared. No response calculated, no expression managed. He was just a man in a courtroom, looking at a woman who had told the truth on his behalf after he had given her every reason not to, and he had no idea what to do with that except feel it, which was he was discovering its own particular kind of terrifying and its own particular kind of relief. For the first time in as long as he could remember, not knowing what came next did not feel like a problem. The judge granted temporary custody to Evan, with a 6-month review. Standard language, careful conditions, the considered decision of a person who took the weight of it seriously. Lily, who had been sitting perfectly still through the entire proceeding with her hands in her lap like a very small person attending a very important meeting, stood up the moment the gavel came down and crossed the bar and walked directly to Evan and Maya and put one arm around each of them simultaneously. She was 7 years old and approximately 4 feet tall, and she held on with complete conviction. Evan put his hand on the back of her head. He didn't trust his voice. Lily pulled back just enough to look up at him. She leaned in and said, very quietly, into the side of his face, "I told you." He didn't ask her what she'd told him. He already knew. The courthouse hallway was marble and fluorescent and entirely without atmosphere, and it was where Evan caught up with Maya before she reached the door. "Hey," he said. She stopped, turned. He had prepared nothing. That was, he had decided sometime around 3 in the morning, the only way to do this correctly. "I read your letter," he said, "the one you wrote for the community center project, and the names below it." He held her gaze. 23 of them. Maya was very still. "I can't give that back," he said. "I know I can't, and I'm not asking you to forgive me today. I don't think I've earned that yet." He paused. "But I started fixing it. Not for the hearing. Not for any of this." She looked at him for a long moment. Something in her face moved, not softened, exactly, but opened. A door that had been closed making room. "I know," she said quietly. He waited. "Someone forwarded me an email this morning," she said, "from the district planning office, about the East Side site." She watched him. There was no name on the proposal. He said nothing. "When did you decide?" she asked. "Wednesday," he said. "After I read the names. 2 days before the hearing. 1 day after she'd walked out of his apartment. When there was nothing to gain from it except the fact of it." Maya looked at him for a long moment in the terrible fluorescent light of a courthouse hallway, and then she exhaled slowly, completely, the way you exhaled when you'd been holding something for a long time, and finally, carefully, set it down. "Okay," she said, quietly. Just that. It was not a resolution. It was not a declaration. It was a beginning, offered honestly, which was the only kind that held. Lily chose the restaurant, which meant it had paper placemats and crayons in a cup on the table, and a kid's menu with a word search on the back, that she completed before the food arrived and then pretended she hadn't, so she could do it again. She ate half her grilled cheese, declared the milkshake the best milkshake in the known universe, and spent a considerable amount of time working on something in the small notebook she'd started carrying after Evan bought it for her at the grocery store, on a night that felt like a long time ago. Near the end of the meal, she tore out a page and slid it across the table to the space between Evan and Maya, not to either of them individually. It was her family tree, the one from the school project, redrawn in colored pencil, neater this time, with more branches, more ovals. The ones that had been empty were filled now, his name on one side, her mother's, with the small star, on another, grandparents. A branch for friends she'd decided counted. And on the rightmost branch, in careful letters, in the color she'd chosen deliberately, a warm, particular orange that she'd once described as the color of kitchens when it's nighttime, Miss Reyes. Maya looked at the drawing for a long moment, then she looked at Evan. "She drew it before I could ask permission," he said. Maya's mouth curved. "Do you object?" He looked at the drawing. At Lily, who was now aggressively not watching them, while also watching them completely. At Maya, in the warm, ordinary light of a restaurant that smelled like French fries and crayons, in a booth that was slightly too small, on a Friday evening that had started in a courtroom and landed, somehow, here. No, he said. One word, nothing else. But the thing about one true word, said simply, without anything added, is that it doesn't need anything added. It was enough. It was, in fact, exactly enough.